So, if you came expecting Idris Elba, then that was the wrong Luther. I'm talking about Luther a bit this year because this is the 500th anniversary of the beginnings of the Reformation. And personally, as a researcher, I'm interested in language, I'm interested in the Bible, I'm interested in Bible translation, but not in a dry way. I'm interested in Bible translation because it influences our culture. And what I'm going to try and show you in 10 minutes is one small way in which Martin Luther, a trigger person for the Reformation, has ended up influencing English today. Big task. So I'm going to do this with an illustration taken from one particular book of the Bible. It's a book which starts out as the story of a family, mum, dad, 2 sons. This family are living in a country where there is famine, and so they head east to try and find a solution. Things go well. Sons get married. Turn for the worse. All the men die. We're 4 verses into the Bible story, right? And the story then follows mum, as she goes back, and the other women, particularly one daughter-in-law, whose name I will now give you, is Ruth. So we're looking at the book of Ruth. Okay, this here in front of you is a very clever version of the Bible, the Complutensian Polyglot. Polyglot means lots of languages. Printed between about 1517, so beginning of the Reformation, through 1522. This is actually coming not from the Reformation, though this is coming from a very strong Roman Catholic. Okay. And what we have, so we've got this middle column here, is the traditional Latin translation of the Bible. Associated with Jerome, the Latin Vulgate. And that's where I wanted us to start. On the other side, we've got the Hebrew, we've got a kind of coding across, and here on this side, we've got the ancient Greek translation, and because people needed some help with their Greek, we've got the Latin written in between. So you can tell people that you've studied today, you've studied Greek and Hebrew and Latin, and yeah, German too. So what I wanted to focus on today was actually names, because you can deal with those in different languages. So this name, Elimelech, this is the father who dies. Now, when you translate names, one way to do it is to go, well, how do I exactly recreate as closely as I can the sounds of this name from the one language in the other language? That's what's happened here. Now that's a decision, because if you were translating the story of Red Riding Hood and all you did was to take the sounds, Red Riding Hood, then you would not have taken really the meaning that's conveyed by that across into the other language, right? And there is every possibility that when this story was first being told, the meaning of that name was important, because it has inside it ideas. It has inside it the idea of my God, and it has inside it the idea of king. And this family, in a time of famine, living in the era before there were kings, you know, my God is king, has to leave the land. It's just possible that if you thought that was important, if it was that kind of a story, then you would try, rather than literally transliterating the name, you would try and convey that somehow. And this gets kind of more important. So these are the daughters-in-law. We've got Ruth, and we've got Orpha, which is a slightly funny translation, or transliteration. But the name I wanted to focus on is this one. So this is the Latin translation, Noemi, traditional Latin. We also have the Greek, which is Naomi. And later on, this character, she plays with her name. She says, don't call me this one thing. So I'm going to play the story game. Don't call me sweetie, she says. Call me bitterness, right? If you want to go with a good translation. If you go and look in a Bible, it's almost certainly going to say, don't call me, you know, name transliterated. Call me name transliterated. And then you're like, well, that doesn't really convey the meaning. Anyhow, so this is what the traditional version of this name is before Luther. True or false time, right? Point at that wall if you think Luther was the first person to translate the Bible into German. Point at that wall if you think he wasn't the first person to translate the Bible into German. Okay, good. I always like to ask questions like that. So this is the first Bible in German in print, right? This was printed in the 1460s, and you can see it's before Luther, okay? There are more than a dozen Bibles printed in German before Luther. The nice thing about studying Luther and his Bible translation is that we actually still have manuscripts where this is him working at his Bible translation. And unfortunately, because I've had to take this from somebody else's photograph that was black and white, you can barely tell. But the text over here is a bit lighter than some of the text here. And that's because we have not only his first time that he tries writing this, and he's crossing bits out, but we have him going back with a red pen. Right? You just don't normally get this when you're studying a translator's work. So this is an image from the book of Job. This is the kind of critical edition where people had to work out how are we going to represent what he did in a pre-digital era. And so zooming in on the book of Ruth, you will see, I hope, that we've got an A, Naomi, right? And down here, that daughter-in-law has become Arpa. Arpa sounds kind of odd, but Naomi should be beginning to sound a little bit familiar. So this is the 1524 original printing, the first version of Luther's Ruth in print. And you can see, again, so Arpa with the A and Naomi. This is an English Bible. It's the first English Bible in print. And you can see Naomi, and you can see Arpa. So the first English Bible produced by Coverdale, he was very strongly influenced by German and Germanic language Bibles, and so we wind up with the A's coming into English. Now, Luther's really definite about this, because this note here is telling me from the critical edition that he's overwritten again the A of Arpa in red. So not only did he write an A the first time, because it's absolutely an A, he's a little bit less committed with the other name. And I'm going to shift now, and I'm going to start calling her Naomi, because that is how, or Naomi, which is how we would really recognize that name now in English. And if we stop and ask why is he doing this, I think one key answer is that he's learning his Hebrew from books. This is Johannes Reuklin's the first attempt at writing a kind of beginner's guide to Hebrew, and Reuchlin works through his verbs, through his vowels. And if I put up the names, Naomi and Orpah, you can begin to see that at the far right over there, Karmetz, that symbol is coming under Naomi, right? That's what it looks like. And if you're being told that that's the A, so A, this is an A sound, right? Then you're going to go, okay, so then that makes that name Naomi. So we can kind of trace a line between how Luther's learning his language, how he is learning Hebrew, and how we end up with that name now in English. So every time that you meet a Naomi, you can think, oh, there's a little bit of Luther influencing our language. There are many other ways, so I just picked the example of a name because that was an easy thing to get across in 10 minutes. But in a couple of months' time, I'll be giving another talk that's a half-hour talk as part of the Pint of Science Festival. So you can come and hear me explain a bit more and actually talk about how this ends up influencing much bigger cultural ideas. So here we have Luther's 1524 text from a critical edition, Luther's 1545 text. A small change here, but I would argue that this tiny change, which comes in a text that's so complicated that somebody wrote an article where they showed 19 different ways of translating it, right? When Luther comes to solve this problem, we actually have him. So he doesn't just translate the Bible once, he keeps going at this. This is April 1540. We've got him now with a set of friends revising things. And we can tell on the one side, he's making changes here. This is the changes. On the other side, though, we can see him beginning to comment. And he's switching between German and Latin, and he's making his decisions about what the Bible should say and about that translation on the basis of his ideas about the characters And in this case, it means that it's not Ruth stood waiting for an answer to a question, but she's been working really hard all day because she's a pious woman, and pious women should work hard, and that makes Ruth an excellent model for everybody. And Luther's idea of the deserving poor takes as its model this character Ruth and his way of translating her. He also did Latin translation, but that's for another day.